Welcome, everybody. It's great to have you with us today. We are very honored to have Luz María de la Mora with us, the Undersecretary of Commerce for Trade in the new administration of President Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Luz is a very capable and experienced former negotiator and also business person. And I had the great pleasure of working with Luz when she was heading We Connect, which is an organization that promotes women entrepreneurs and the connections between them across the Americas. And also she was founder of a great organization called Vital Voices in Mexico, which I had the pleasure of working with from the 1990s forward, and is also working in support of women not only in business, but in all different walks of life. And so she's been a real champion outside of government, as well as having very influential positions previously in the foreign ministry and in the economy ministry, the commerce ministry, both in Mexico City and overseas. So it's a great pleasure to have us to have this opportunity to hear from her, all of us, to share in the wisdom and perspective that she can share with us today as this new administration in Mexico is finding its ground, moving forward, and playing its part in what the president has called the fourth transformation of Mexico, as well as maintaining, building, strengthening the very important relationship between Mexico and the United States. So welcome, Luz. It's a great pleasure to have you with us.
Maybe I can, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Anthony Wayne, for your kind words of introduction. Thank you, Duncan, for the invitation to be here with you all today at the Woodrow Wilson Center. You know that it's very close to my heart. I have the fondest memories of my time here working as a fellow back in 2009, and I do follow very closely what the Woodrow Wilson Center does and the Mexico Institute does. We have a lot of respect for the very fine work that the Woodrow Wilson Center always does, so it's really a privilege for me to be here. I would like to spend some time just explaining a little bit about where we are in Mexico right now today with respect to trade policy, but I would also love to have probably a Q&A session so that I can also get a sense of what are your concerns and how do you see the new government coming up. I have a presentation, but I think it's a little bit long, so I will go very fast. I would like to, before I start the presentation, I would like just to make a very quick introduction and try to put everything in perspective. As you know, President López Obrador won very strong majority in the election in 2018. And that election, basically, we see it as a mandate for key concerns of people regarding the fight to corruption, increasing security, the fight against crime, rule of law, and very closely also a need for people to feel that the economy is doing some service to them. We need to find ways to make people's lives better, workers' rights, to have a better wages and better lives. So really, President López Obrador has put at the center of his agenda these issues, and that's why he wants to really make a difference, make a change, to transform Mexico, to make people have better lives. That is the concern that we have in government. So having said that, you will see a lot of changes, and he's really trying to place the fight against corruption at the center, because he knows that by fighting against corruption and by reducing corruption in Mexico, we will be able to have a country that has better foundations for the future. And fighting corruption is also going to help the economy. It's going to help business feel better. So we have to see this as an integral question. Now, we also have at the center of our agenda social policy. He's paying close attention to groups of people that have not been taken care of in the past, or that feel or that are truly disadvantaged. And for that reason, he's developing programs that have to do with specific attention to young people, who need to have better opportunities to participate in the formal economy, to be trained, to have skills to be part of the formal economy. Also, people in disadvantaged conditions, indigenous people in the third age. So he's really looking into the needs of people. And he's also looking into closing the gap between parts of the country that have been lagging behind, that have very poor rates of growth, very poor rates of social development. And that's why he has focused a lot of his attention on the development of the South. He's working on a program with the U.S. and Central American countries to try to develop the South. He's putting a lot of attention and energy and resources on the Mayan train, the transseismic train, developing the South, developing the special economic zones in the South. So he really wants to make a deep transformation. And he's also putting a lot of attention on the energy sector, because the energy sector can be also a trigger for growth. Having said all that, we know that for a social policy agenda to yield results, and also to be able to fight against corruption and to bring rule of law into place, we need to have an economy that is competitive, an economy that grows. We need to have foreign direct investment. We need to have private investment in Mexico. So to a certain extent, you will see continuity with respect to the policies, but you will see some very strong adjustments. What do we mean about continuity? Continuity with respect to being a government that is responsible with the economy. Strong macroeconomic fundamentals are a prerequisite for any successful social policy, and President López Obrador understands that very well. So we are focusing on having a strong an economy that is stable, fiscal policy that is responsible, an autonomous central bank that is responsible for monetary policy that will be responding to the needs of an economy that has stable macroeconomic fundamentals. In the Ministry of Economy, we're responsible for promoting productive activities. We're responsible for creating the best possible business environment for business to develop, to grow, to promote economic growth in the country, and also to create jobs. So we're focused very much on job creation. The three pillars that we have in the Ministry of Economy have to do with inclusion, innovation, and diversification. Those are our three main pillars in any public policy that we develop. And in this sense, and now I would like to narrow it down to my area of responsibility, which is foreign trade. Foreign trade is key to Mexico's economy. Mexico is one of the most open economies in the world, but trade is also essential to the well-being of the economy, the well-being of our country. We're a very integrated economy to the world. As you see here, Mexico has been able to grow and develop thanks to its integration to the world economy. So you will see that we understand that trade is one of the most important engines of growth for Mexico, and we need to take care of trade. But we also need to improve the quality of our trade, and we need to make sure that trade is responsive to the needs of people. We need to find ways to include more sectors, to include more firms, to include more products, to include more regions into the value chains and into the international trade activity. And we also need to ensure that we are able to diversify our sources of exports, our regions that are exporting, but also we need to diversify our trade with the world. Now, we cannot be as dependent as we have been from the U.S. market. We understand the U.S. market is our most important trading partner and will continue to be, but we need to find alternatives. We need to find other venues. We need to find other ways. So, and with respect to innovation, we also understand that today we may be centering probably a little bit too much on traditional sectors, traditional market access to products. But we also need to understand that we have to create the rules and we have to create the economy that is already requiring today's activities that has to do with the digital economy, innovation, Industrial Revolution 4.0. We are there, and we need to create the environment and we need to create the conditions for the digital economy to thrive. And that's what we are trying to do in the Ministry of Economy. I would like to, just to emphasize that with respect to our presence in the world, we have 13 free trade agreements. The last one was, it's a new one for us. It's CPTPP that just got implemented on December 30th for 6 countries, January 14th for Vietnam too. So now, as a result of this new agreement that we have in place, CPTPP, we have a network of 13 free trade agreements with basically 50 countries in the world. Those countries are in North America, Europe, Latin America, but very importantly, Asia. We are very keen on strengthening our trading relations with Asia, the Asia Pacific, and we want to use the CPTPP to make this happen. There are right now 2 agreements that are in the process of being ratified. One, as you know, is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, which is the modernization of the NAFTA, and the second one is the modernization of the EU agreement, our first and third largest trading partners. We are very much into also having deeper integration with Latin America because we believe that Mexico is a country that has the potential to integrate efficiently into different global markets. Mexico has become a global export hub, and we are a powerhouse, a manufacturing powerhouse, and we intend to continue to support that. Now, with respect to North America, I don't think I need to go into the details of where we are with respect to North America, but we just want to, I just want to convey the message that in the López Obrador government, the Ministry of Economy, we all understand that the integration with North America is not an option. This is where we belong to. We belong to North America. We are committed to an integrated North America. We're committed to a competitive North America. And we are committed to having the best conditions to be able to attract investment and to be considered as continue to be considered an export platform. We believe that Mexico is a source of competitiveness for North America. We believe that Mexico is an ideal partner for the U.S., and we know that as a result of the NAFTA, we have been able to integrate our economies in such a way that the region really is it cannot be considered North America without Mexico. The Mexican production is essential. Mexico has been very successful in complementing production in North America, basically in the transportation equipment sector and computer and electronic products, where we basically do half of our trading manufacturing. Our exports are growing at an amazing growth, but also something that we should not forget is that the NAFTA has created a North American integration whereby our products are North American. They cannot be considered Mexican, American, or Canadian. We integrate a lot of inputs from the region among the 3 of us. So it's really very hard at the end of the day to say this is a Mexican or a U.S. product. It's a North American product as a result of NAFTA. We are in the process of implementation, of ratification. As you know, the López Obrador administration participated as an observant after the election in July 2018. We were invited to be observers, to participate and to understand what was the content of the agreement. So for President López Obrador, this was very important to understand where we're standing, and he also understands that this is an agreement that has modernized the face of the Mexican economy and that will continue to provide benefits to the region. So President López Obrador participated as observant, but also validated the whole process. And we took over in this administration the results of the previous administration, and that's what we're working on. We're working right now on the ratification process. This is over. This is an agreement that is a modernized agreement with new chapters, for example, having to do with digital trade, energy, but also issues like labor, environment, anti-corruption, and competitiveness. Those are issues that we welcome because they also reflect the kind of economy that North America is becoming, but it also offers the kinds of rules that we need in North America to be able to provide a mechanism whereby we can attract investment in high value-added productions, but also in the processes whereby we see that technology, the Internet of Things, all of the revolutionary things that are happening do remain in the region, and Mexico is part of this process too. There are many things within the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement that I just want to, very fast touch upon some of them. I think that at the end of the day, what I really want to underscore is the fact that with all these provisions that we have negotiated in this agreement, what we have in front of us is a new set of rules that for Mexico are important because they will also give us a sense of what is the direction where we want to take our country to in terms of trade, in terms of production, in terms of investment, what kind of investment we want to attract in our country, what kind of production we want to develop, and what are the perspectives for Mexico in North America. And we think that with these rules that were negotiated and that obviously will require some adjustments, for example, with the proper intellectual property rules will have to be internalized and adjusted. Those sets of rules will bring Mexico into the next step of regulations that will put us in a situation in which our companies will be operating under framework that really will force them to modernize, to innovate, and to be cutting edge, to maintain North America competitive. I just want to say that we are in Mexico considering the labor reform, which is also part of the things that we need to do here in order to be able to comply with what we negotiated in the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. We believe that there are issues that need to be solved soon. For example, the 232 steel and aluminum tariff. We really hope to see these tariffs eliminated as soon as possible. We feel that these tariffs are not helping anybody. They're just increasing costs for the region. Mexico is not a national security threat to the U.S. Mexico is a partner to the U.S. Mexico is a source of competitiveness to the U.S. We understand that there's an overcapacity at the global level in terms of steel, but we also believe that we are stronger together as a region as opposed to imposing barriers among each other. And we really don't feel that that's the way to go. We want to understand the issues in the U.S. We want to understand. We want to be creative. We want to be part of the solution, and we believe that there are solutions that can be explored through, for example, monitoring, customs, border control, avoiding transshipment, etc. We're also concerned about other issues that may arise. For example, we have heard lately these days that there's a dispute with respect, or the U.S. Department of Commerce decided not to continue with the suspension agreement in tomato. We feel that that's going to create a problem in the market, and we want to be part of the solution. We want to continue to work with the U.S. We want to to have a US-Mexico-Canada agreement, a NAFTA, that really benefits the three countries. We feel that it's very clear that there's a lot that has been made. There's a lot of benefits to the three parties. There's still a lot of work that can be done. We'll always have sensitivities, but in the López Obrador administration, in the Ministry of Economy, Secretary Graciela Marquez has a vision of Mexico being a global competitor and being a key source and a key partner to the U.S. So we are ready to continue to work. We think that we need to bring this agreement and this relationship to the next stage. And we're interested that in this next stage, our people, our workers, our companies, our regions can be taking advantage of all these benefits. And in the Ministry of Economy, we are working in other areas to make those changes that will actually bring those benefits at the local level. I would leave it there, Duncan, and if there's any questions, I will be happy to take them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary de la Mora. I'm going to be taking questions from the audience in a little while, but I have a couple of questions of my own here that I'd like to put to you, if I may. And the first one is to do with the rather complicated outlook for ratification of USMCA here in the United States and potentially in Canada, potentially in Mexico, but focusing here in the United States to begin with. Back in when the original NAFTA was negotiated, Mexico developed a strategy to try to get that ratified in the United States Congress. Can you talk a little bit about what Mexico's approach is to the problem today? Is it a question of just having conversations with folks up on Capitol Hill, or are there more things that Mexico can and is doing today?
Thank you, Duncan. Well, yes, I mean, this is a very important initiative for us. The way we see is this is a Mexico team effort. This is a country effort. Why? Because we feel that we need to do outreach. We need to educate people on the importance of having this agreement, on the benefits of having a modernized agreement. And in this sense, we are working with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has a very important network of offices in the U.S. At the local level. And we are having the same kind of work, I mean, similar probably to what we did in the early 1990s when we passed this agreement. We're also working very closely with the private sector in Mexico. And they're having their contacts with their counterparts here in the U.S. So I can tell you that it's a government effort. It's a specific ministries, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Agriculture, the consulates, and basically we're having a very important presence, governors from Mexico coming to the U.S. And our basic message is that this is the agreement that was possible. This is the agreement that we were able to negotiate as regions. We have heard that after all these discussions, after all these tensions that we had in the last 2 years, people have come to realize that NAFTA is important, that NAFTA or that North American integration is not such a bad idea, and that North American integration has been taken for granted. So I think that people are starting to realize that it is worth our while to make the effort to having this agreement ratified. I know that in each one of our countries we will have our own explanations to make, our own education to make. That's what we're doing in Mexico. In Mexico, we also need to have this ratified in the Senate. We are working with the Senate, explaining what are the implications of this agreement, why it is important, what are the things that we need to do. But for Mexico, this is really a very important agreement because it will also help us to move forward in terms of having the laws, the regulations that require for Mexico to be able to have a better integration. We want a better quality integration. We know that we have done things well, but we know that we need to improve others. We need to have more companies participate. We need to have more local content, which doesn't mean import substitution from the 1970s. It means creating jobs and creating business opportunities for local companies. If we have more local companies participating indirectly or directly in international trade, we will have better quality companies, companies that are sustainable, companies that can provide better jobs, companies that can grow. So it is in our interest to have these kinds of regulations, and it is in our interest to raise the bar of regulations, not only for trading goods and services, but also for all of the activities that surround those activities. And I have to say, we welcome the anti-corruption chapter. We think that that's very timely, and we are very happy that we have to have that, and that we have other sets of rules that will help President López Obrador pull the fight on, bring the fight against corruption.
Thank you. The second question I have for you, it goes to one of the charts that you put up on the screen about the breakdown of U.S.-Mexico trade, and in particular on energy. 10 years ago, Mexico had a very healthy, $9 billion, $10 billion surplus in the energy trade with the United States. And if you look at the numbers today, I think numbers you put up there were that, yes, whilst on oil and gas, Mexico still has a surplus. If you look at refined products, there is a very, very heavy surplus for the United States. So combining the two things, the United States now sells $25 billion in energy to Mexico. It's become a very, very important market that really wasn't there 10 years ago. Part of that is natural gas, but a large part of it is refined products. With all the changes that are going on in Mexico in the energy sector that you alluded to, and recognizing that it's not your area, but of course energy trade does come in here. I mean, how do you see that developing? Because I've begun to hear some concerned voices from folks in Houston, for example, about whether or not the market, which has become so lucrative for them, is going to be there in a few years' time.
No, you have a very important point here. The energy sector is essential for a North American integration. It's essential for North American industry, and it's essential for North American competitive. So we need to ensure that we have a North American competitive energy market. President López Obrador is really very interested in having a strong energy sector in Mexico. He is paying a lot of attention to Pemex, which is the Mexico's oil company, state-owned company, that he is very much into having a healthy Pemex. Because we understand that it's not only a matter of having an important company, but it's very important that we have a healthy company with all of the spillover effects that can have in it. So the energy sector is central to him. President López Obrador has not said that he will eliminate the energy reform. He said that he's going to revise some of the contracts and some of the policies that have been implemented. But I guess that right now we are in the process of revising what's going on and trying to put in shape the energy sector, because we understand that the energy sector is essential to Mexico. Now, we also understand that the U.S. has grown dramatically in terms of the energy sector as producer, but we also see each other not only as clients, but we see each other as partners in the region. But Mexico needs to be a strong partner to the U.S., and we need probably to clean some of the act in Mexico.
Thank you. My last question for you before we open up to the public is going beyond North America. And I think I'm not mistaken on this one, but the president said that he wasn't interested in negotiating any new trade deals. He wants to focus on the ones that have already been negotiated, and to look at how to best take advantage of those. And so part one is, what are the prospects for expanding Mexico's trading relations around the world beyond USMCA, CPTPP? And then also, what is the vision that Mexico currently holds with regards to the WTO? I mean, these are very interesting times for the WTO, particularly because of what's happening in this country and the assault on the WTO and the rules of the international trade regime. And as a small open economy, a medium-sized open economy, Mexico depends hugely upon trade. I mean, the numbers that you put up on the screen show that. The WTO matters for Mexico. So what is Mexico doing on that front?
Yeah, thank you. Well, with respect to new trade deals, I guess that right now we are basically, I mean, the previous administration negotiated, I guess that 3 very important trade agreements for Mexico: the renegotiation or modernization of NAFTA, the modernization of the EU agreement, our third largest trading partner, and the CPTPP. So we have a full plate right now. That doesn't mean that we will not consider other countries. For example, we are right now working with Brazil, with Argentina, with Mercosur, with Ecuador. We're still working with the European Free Trade Area Association. Of course, those agreements are smaller compared to what we have right now. But right now, the efforts that we have in front of us have to do with ratification of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement and the Mexico-EU Free Trade Agreement, which will require a lot of work and energy. We are in the process of implementing CPTPP, which is also an overhaul in many areas. And we need to make sure that our legislation is in compliance with the CPTPP. We have some transition periods that we have to accomplish in the next 4 years, so that will take a lot of our energy. And then we may see that CPTPP may be considering new members. It may be the case that we may end with some additional agreements that will be on the margin. That does not mean that they're not important. They are very important, but in terms of the size of trade, they're smaller. But I want to tell you that Mexico wants to really make these agreements, I mean, they are a very important source of trust, confidence, competitiveness, but we also want to take these agreements in Mexico to more people to understand what are the benefits and to understand how they can take advantage of it and to let them know what are the things that they need to do to be able to be part of the process. So I guess that it's an effort on 2 ways, for us outside, but for us inside too. With respect to WTO, your question is extremely important. Mexico is fully committed to WTO and to the reform process. Why? Because we depend on trade. And the multilateral trading system and the rules of the multilateral trading system are essential to Mexico. We need to ensure that any changes and any reforms guarantee that rules are there for trade to happen. We need to ensure that there's a dispute settlement mechanism that works, an appellate body that is in place and it is effective. And we know that we are, the multilateral trading system and multilateral organizations are under a lot of pressure. But Mexico is participating in the Ottawa group in the discussions to see how we can provide alternative solutions to the process. Mexico is committed and is participating in the new negotiations that were launched on e-commerce along with 76 countries because we know that we need to modernize those rules. But Mexico is fully committed to making the reform process a process that can lead us to a system that responds to today's economy, to today's international trade, but also that will result in a new set of rules or in better rules, not in not having rules. Mexico wants to be a constructive partner in all of this.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Wayne, would you like to ask a question? And then I'm going to take questions from the audience.
Well, maybe Undersecretary, just ask you to talk about a little bit about the labor reform going on in Mexico, and because that is an aspect that will be important for members of the U.S. Congress as they consider this trade agreement.
Yes.
Just talk a bit about that, because I know there are ambitious plans there and there are commitments in the agreement.
Yes. Well, thanks for the question, Ambassador Wayne. First, I would like to say that for President López Obrador, labor reform and the attention to workers is central to his agenda. So I would say that with or without USMCA, we would be looking at a very substantive labor reform in Mexico. You know that in 2017, Mexico passed a constitutional reform regarding labor. Mexico is also part of different ILO conventions. And the new implementing legislation, or the secondary legislation that Congress will have to pass, the bill was introduced on December 22nd, and right now is under discussion in the current Congress. I guess that what I would like to highlight from this labor reform is that it's really a very, very substantive change to what Mexico has had in terms of workers' rights, collective bargaining, labor justice, because it really changes 180 degrees from where we are to where we want to be. Why? Because on one hand, the executive branch will not be involved in issues related to the lives of the trade unions. So in this sense, what the new legislation is proposing, we will see what ends up coming out from Congress, but the legislation proposes to have an independent body that will be in charge of monitoring, verifying, and revising that contracts are done based on the new law, which will guarantee democracy in the trade union, will guarantee free voting, free election of the leaders, free bargaining, collective bargaining rights. Very importantly, also to guarantee labor justice in an independent entity and moving it from the executive branch, from the Juntas de Conciliación y Arbitraje, to the judiciary branch. So we really think that those are very, very substantive changes that will definitely bring workers' laws and rights to a very different purview. And the expectation with this reform is that workers will be in a better position to bargain and negotiate their working conditions based on law. No? So I really think that this reform, of course, we'll have to see how the discussions come around, but this is a very substantive and very important reform, and it also touches upon one of the key issues in President López Obrador's government, which is we need to increase the wages in Mexico. We need to improve the well-being of workers in Mexico. And we have to do it with a law that really helps to create the best conditions also for workers. And that's where we are. And I think that you can expect to see a new law, modern law, that responds to these concerns that are way overdue. And we hope to have this done probably by the end of April, which is when the session ends.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have 24 minutes to take questions from the audience. I've got a hand up over here, sir. Yes. Quick on the draw. The microphone is coming. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself before your question.
Hi, my name is Max Trujillo. I work as a consultant here in Washington, D.C. I wanted to follow up on a question regarding Congress, the United States Congress. As with the new administration in Mexico, we have a new Congress in the United States on the House of Representatives. And the current chair and subcommittee chair of the Ways and Means Committee, who are going to oversee this treaty, have expressed reservations about the labor and the environmental sections, but overall they want to take a good look at the treaty. You mentioned the example of the NAFTA in the 90s. At that time, there were two side agreements that were signed along with NAFTA in order to make that pass through Congress. Do you foresee a similar process taking place if the Democratic Congress feels that the treaty needs more changes? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, right now we're in the process of each country is evaluating the agreement, the Parliament in Canada, Congress in Mexico, the Congress here in the U.S. We feel that this is an agreement that was the right agreement with the right balance. Of course, you can always have better agreements, but perfection is the enemy of progress, and I guess that there needs to be a time in which we need to evaluate the agreement in its own merits and the balances that we're able to reach. No, we are considering this agreement as it is. We're not considering anything else, and I think that the USTR or the U.S. administration will have to explain what's in there and how this agreement responds to their concerns, which is exactly what we're doing. No, I mean, in Mexico, we're explaining to our Congress what's in the agreement, what are the benefits, what are the commitments, and we also need to explain why this is important for Mexico and why this is important to everybody. Of course, that doesn't mean that it's the perfect agreement. No, the perfect agreement doesn't exist. The perfect agreement is the finished agreement, and that's what we have in front of us.
Thank you. Question from this side of the room, if we have one. I thought I saw a hand. No? There we go. Please. If you don't mind waiting for the microphone. Thank you.
Mara Lee, International Trade Today. You mentioned the 232 tariffs on aluminum and steel. Is there a thought to change the mix of retaliatory tariffs in Mexico in order to convince the U.S. to drop those more quickly? And can you give us any color on what that change might be, if so?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I would like to just make a point in the sense that, I mean, Mexico is not does not enjoy retaliation, right? Mexico is not ready to just establish tariffs for the sake of establishing tariffs. We don't feel that that's the way to go. We feel that the ideal or how things should work is under circumstances where we would not have to face these tariffs. However, the previous administration imposed tariffs because those were seen as the only alternative to decision by the U.S. administration to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum that we felt had no merit because Mexico can hardly be considered a national security threat to the U.S. We're not a national security threat. We run a deficit in steel and in aluminum. We are part of an integrated North America steel industry. We help the North America steel industry to build its competitiveness. We recognize that there is a global problem in the steel industry that relates to overcapacity, but that's not the case in Mexico. So that's why we have kept those tariffs, those retaliation tariffs, because we feel that that's the way in which the U.S. Could think twice before doing these kinds of things. Now, we're in the process of evaluating the retaliation products, and we're in the process of reassessing what are the products that we will target. It's not that we want to do it, but we need to also bring some balance and try to adjust some products because we understand also that tariffs hurt us, hurt our consumers. So we will probably choose some new agricultural products, some new industrial products. We will also assess how good some of them have been. Some of them will remain. But yes, we're in the process of assessing that, and you can expect to see something new in the next couple of months.
Thank you very much. A question at the back there.
Hi, my name is Raul Rangel. I'm an international trade attorney, and I have a question concerning the timing of the side letters that were reached during the negotiation of the USMCA, and particularly as they relate to the potential threat of the 232 tariffs on cars and car parts. Is it the expectation of the Mexican government, or would it be fair to say that if those tariffs are recommended by the Department of Commerce and further adopted by the president, is it fair to say that those agreements will still be in play regardless of whether the USMCA is passed in Congress?
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. Yes, with respect to those letters say that even if the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is not in place. In case this happens, Mexico would have a special treatment as a result of these letters. That's right.
Thank you. And I know there was another question over here on the left, and I've got one in the center as well. So if you don't mind taking this one first of all, yes? No? Okay, the question's gone. Back there, please, with the lady with the red cardigan. Is it a cardigan? Jacket? Sweater? It's very nice, whatever.
Thank you.
Right.
Cardigan. I'm actually an intern here at the Wilson Center with the Environmental Change and Security Program. So my question is related to agriculture. I saw that you had a slide up there, but we kind of went over it. And so my question is about the commercialization of agriculture under the NAFTA agreement, which pushed small-scale farmers to prioritize veggies and fruits, which ultimately led to a migration out of the agriculture sector, a gross intensification of pesticides and fertilizers, poor nutrients among population, and then also a reduction in biodiversity of like maize and other type of agricultural crops. So I was wondering if there's anything that you can address, definitely in the face of climate change and the pressures that we face with extreme weather patterns.
Fabulous question. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very broad question.
Yes.
Touches on a lot of very important issues. Thank you. Well, I guess that the agricultural sector in the NAFTA, as in many other free trade agreements, is a very sensitive sector. I will not dwell into the agricultural problems in Mexico, the problems of the agricultural sector, which sometimes go beyond agriculture, and they have to do more with rural development. It is true that there have been some very serious adjustments in some sectors, and for some populations that is very true. And I think that that's one of the things that President López Obrador wants to address, why he's putting so much attention to the South, and that's why he is paying special attention to the southern border, or not southern border, the southern region of Mexico, Yucatan, Oaxaca, Chiapas. He's putting a lot of attention on that. Also, he's paying a lot of attention to communities that are lagging behind. And this goes beyond agricultural production, right? But it does show that we understand that there is a gap between regions, sectors, populations that have been able to participate in international trade in NAFTA, that are more located in the central part of the country and the northern part of the country as opposed to the southern part of the country. So having said that, Mexico under NAFTA has specialized in certain kind of crops, not only because of the opportunity that is in terms of weather, but also in terms of the water availability, the land availability, land laws, property laws. I mean, there's a whole host of questions. For Mexico, there's difference. It's hard to say that there's one agricultural sector in Mexico. There's several agricultural sectors. And we need to make sure that those things that are working fine, those things that are becoming effective, competitive, where there's investment, where Mexico has been thriving, we need to take care of that, and we need to make sure that those things continue to work. But we also need to take care of those who have not been able to take advantage of the opportunities that the market brings, or that are not ready to compete in the same conditions as imports. But that's something that has to do with domestic policies, that rural development, social development, agricultural development. What I can say about the new modernized agreement is that it does provide for more refined regulations with respect to food safety standards, with respect to subsidies that are sometimes key to define who's participating in which kinds of products and sectors. Mexico also benefits greatly from having access to production, agricultural production in the U.S. Dairy products, beef, poultry, pork, grains, all sorts of grains, because the U.S. is extremely competitive, no? And I think that we have been able to find ways to have shared production and to complement each other. Mexico is also a very important source of produce to the U.S., avocados, tomatoes, fruits, vegetables. I mean, it's a whole host of the whole salad is there, no? And we really help the U.S. to have a better diet at the end of the day, no? So I think that in that perspective, we are trying to create regulations that are responsible with the environment, responsible with the health of people, responsible with the use of resources. I mean, I really think that that's our intent. I don't think that there's any other intent. The challenge is important. It requires resources. But I also think that the agricultural sector in Mexico has also created new opportunities where there were none in the past. And not only to export to the US and Canada, the agricultural sector in Mexico has been able to become a competitive sector vis-a-vis other countries. Mexico is participating in other markets where we have free trade agreements and also where we don't have any. For example, Saudi Arabia, South Korea, China, countries that probably we would never have thought that we would have had the capacity. And that is not minor, because those opportunities are creating local jobs, are creating local businesses, are really strengthening the value chain in the sector. So I guess that we have an agricultural minister, Dr. Victor Villalobos, who is a very fine, very talented, very experienced secretary who has always worked in agriculture from all sorts of walks in life. He knows very well the agricultural sector in Mexico, and I'm sure that the policies that will come from the Ministry of Agriculture will be very responsible and very responsive policies to address all of the questions that you mentioned, which we know that sometimes are very specific, but that overall will help to bring the agricultural sector up. I mean, the agricultural sector is a very important sector for Mexico, and we know that we will have the President López Obrador has mentioned also that he has decided that he wants to make sure that people in the countryside in agriculture have a better life too.
Just to complement what you said, Undersecretary, I was lucky enough to sit with the Agricultural Secretary at the lunch at the inauguration for President López Obrador. And I mean, he's a very, very smart guy. Mm-hmm. He has clear set ideas about the agricultural sector. Mm-hmm. It was impressive. Let's not forget that Andrés Manuel López Obrador has claimed that he wants to make Mexico independent in food production in the long term. I mean, that's an impossibility in the short term, but that's something that could transform the countryside. And just, I mean, in my own experience with Mexico, and I'm sure that a lot of other people in the room will share this, the transformation of food in Mexico over the past 25 years is nothing short of extraordinary. I mean, higher quality in so many areas just because people are now producing not just for the domestic market or even for a local market, but now for an international market. And you see that particularly in things like pork production in Mexico. Right. That, pork used to be something that you had to be very careful with in Mexico, and now we're up to U.S. standards. But of course, to reinforce your point, there are winners and losers always in this, and that's a very tricky thing. One of the things that we're doing right now at the Wilson Center with a grant from the Walmart Foundation is we're looking into labor conditions in certain sectors, in particular berry farming up in the Mexican north. Never eat shredded wheat at Northwest. And what we're discovering there is that there are actually labor shortages there. They can't find enough people who are going to work there, and they're offering competitive salaries, but they're having to bring people from way in the south of Mexico and, of course, increasingly from Central America as well, which suggests a number of things. It suggests that agriculture is doing very, very well. It also suggests that Mexican workers have a lot of opportunities. And so this is not a desperation source of employment. This is something that people will choose to go into if the price is right. I've got time for one more question. There's one, a hand straight away up there. Oh, when you came back to me, you did. Okay, we'll let you ask a question as well.
Hi, my name is Justin Margolis, the government of Quebec, and we talk a lot about the relations between the U.S. and Mexico in D.C. I'm wondering, are there any issues outstanding between Mexico and Canada in the agreements?
Thank you. And let's take the second question as well here, and then we can wrap everything up.
Thank you. Kat Lucero with MLEX. Just to follow up on the retaliatory tariffs, can you explain more about which products your government is considering the next few weeks or next few months?
Great.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we seem to take Canada for granted, or Mexico-Canada relationship. It's inevitable that the size of the U.S. Economy and market tends to overshadow each other. But I have to say that really under the NAFTA, we were able to develop a relationship where there was none, really. When we negotiated the NAFTA back in the early 1990s, Mexico-Canada trade was close to $2 billion. Today, that trade is closer to $23 billion, so it's an increase of almost 10 times. But in addition to that, also, Mexico and Canada started looking at each other in terms of investment. Canada is a very important investor in Mexico in the mining sector, in the banking sector, and in a whole host of other areas. Canada discovered that it could do business in Mexico. And Mexico also discovered that Canada is an interesting market, not only to export, but also to invest. I guess that Mexico and Canada share a lot of values in terms of inclusiveness, in terms of Native people, in terms of the importance of having an economy that is responsive to the needs of people. So I could say that right now, under the new administration, there's been a very important approach to the Canadian government. Even before President López Obrador took office, there was a delegation of 7 appointed ministers that would be appointed later on under the new administration that made a tour of Canada. They were invited to get to know what Canada is and to establish an agenda beyond NAFTA. We know that NAFTA is essential. The U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is essential to the three of us, but we know that there's also a bilateral relationship that Canada and Mexico can develop in several areas. And way before, when there was no visa, everybody would go to Canada to spend the summer and also to learn English. No, so now it's been simplified. So now that is back. So I think that there's a whole host of areas in which Canada and Mexico share a lot in common. And I have to say that in WTO, Canada and Mexico are working very closely and very hard on making reform a possibility. So we are completely on board in the Ottawa group, and we're participating very closely with Minister Jim Carr in this discussion. With respect to retaliation, we're in the process of evaluating. As I mentioned, it's not that we want to retaliate or that we like retaliation, but we need to assess the composition of those tariffs. We will probably look into the steel products, and we will pick and choose new products in the steel sector and also in the agricultural sector. We will have a variety, a good basket of products that we hope will make people understand that, it's a wake-up call. That's what we want to make this. And hopefully this will make all us understand that there's no reason why these tariffs should be in place, and that the real solution to this is to eliminate these tariffs and find ways in which we can enforce a region that is integrated and that we can avoid transshipments and we can avoid evasion and elusion and all the things that are of concern to the industry and that are legitimate concerns. And we're ready to work with the U.S. in that matter.
Thank you very much. You've reminded me the question about Canada that Laura Dawson, the director of our Canada Institute, sends you her very best. She unfortunately couldn't be here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The Wilson Center and the Mexico Institute is ready and willing to help in any way with the dialogue over USMCA and trade in general. So please, the invitation is always here for you to come and to speak. And of course, I'd like to extend that via yourself to other members of the Mexican government. I mean, it's very, very important that we have an open conversation dialogue here in Washington about Mexico. And just to close on a personal note, we're very proud to have you as a former fellow and as a good friend of the Wilson Center. And so thank you for being part of our extended family. Ladies and gentlemen, Undersecretary de la Mora.